Wake-up calls in gaming can be startling. Sometimes the developer needs you to do something if you want to progress further in the game. Sometimes these are optional goals, adjacent to completing the main story. But oftentimes, the rewards for going on these types of ventures are great. My name is Saint Tontus, and today I'll be covering one side quest that players can go on in Wuthering Waves, the Tower of Adversity. Specifically, the Experimental Zone. The Experimental Zone is one of the biggest wake-up calls a new player can have in Wuthering Waves, because you need two teams to clear this content. Hyper-investing in one character, while a worthwhile strategy for clearing the overworld and the first zone of the tower, isn't viable if you want to get the rest of the rewards available. There are a lot. The biggest prizes here include up to 150 gold tuners and 80 purple experience materials for your echoes. This is one of the best sources of these materials in the game, and they are all gotten without spending a single wave plate. The end result of all of this is that at minimum, players will need to invest into 2 DPS characters to get all of the potential experimental zone rewards. Players will need to invest in 3 if they want to clear the hazard zone. This is because the Tower of Adversity uses a fatigue system that limits the number of times a player can participate in combat. Each zone has 4 levels, with a ramping energy cost that totals to 10 for the entire zone. If a character has energy left, they can participate in battle. Using a single character for all 4 battles in a single zone will consume all 10 of that energy. This also means that you can swap around the units as long as they all don't run out of energy by the time you get all of the floors completed. The experimental zone is a lot more challenging than the first zone in the Tower of Adversity. However, it is a bit more forgiving compared to the hazard zone. The buffs within the experimental zone are a lot more general and can encompass a wide array of DPS. The buffs in the experimental zone, well, they heavily promote the use of certain characters based off their bonuses. Couldn't imagine who. Building a good team comp for each zone requires some foresight. Luckily, you can preview the enemies on each floor. If the Thundering Mephis, for example, is on floor 4 of one side, it's probably not a good idea to commit to using Calcharo on that side. Similarly, with the Aches as the boss on the second experimental zone, you probably do not want to play Spectral Rover, though nobody really is playing this bum anyways, since you get Cooler Rover by the time you're even able to tackle the experimental zone. Because of this information we have available, your planning is key. The first zone of the experimental area is almost perfectly designed for Jiyan. Jiyan is so good, in fact, that my level 60 Jiyan was able to 2-man the entire floor with Verena. No signature weapon. I even swapped out Verena for Baija, giving her all of Verena's echoes and weapons, and 2-manned the Mephis after clearing it the first time. Both of these sustainers are level 40, with unupgraded skills. This is because Jiyan has some of the most potent grouping I have ever seen in a video game. Every single one of his attacks in Quilong form is like using a Kazuha E in Genshin. Much like his voice line during his ultimate says, you are actually unstoppable if you are facing primarily low-cost mobs. You'll pick them up, disabling their attack animations while inflicting a massive amount of DPS. This makes the first 3 floors an absolute cakewalk, as Jiyan hardly takes any damage at all throughout his basic rotations as long as you're able to gather up all the enemies. If you are at any point seeing this ultimate animation instead of this one, you are playing Jiyan incorrectly. Incorrectly managing Jiyan's Forte bar or his resolve will result in a huge DPS loss when casting his ultimate. You need to make sure to save up to 30 resolve or half his Forte bar to make use of this enhanced ultimate. It does a lot of damage. You'll obviously skip out on this piece if you only need a bit more damage to kill the boss, but weaving this into your Jiyan rotation is key to maximizing his DPS. This makes energy regeneration a great stat to have on him, and why the left side bonus is so strong for this particular character. Past the first 3 floors and against the Mephis, Jiyan is one of the easiest characters to actually pilot against this boss. In Qilong mode specifically, it's almost as if you have to intentionally miss parries against this boss. All you'll be hearing during the fight is this. So a decently built Jiyan was able to 2-man this. But if he does need some extra juice, you haven't really gotten the perfect set of echoes on him yet, you have a good number of sub-DPS options available that will significantly increase his damage. Mortefi here is the number one choice, given the large buffs that he gives to heavy attacks, which are a majority of Jiyan's kit. Every attack made by Jiyan, including his enhanced ultimate, is heavy attack damage. With a set of energy regeneration echoes, and if you're lucky, cadenza, Mortefi can quickly regenerate the concerto energy required to activate this buff without eating into too much rotation time. Jiyan's best supports for some reason all shoot guns. Alto is an option as well due to his outro skill, which provides an incredible arrow damage deepen. The problem occurs with Alto's concerto energy regeneration. Cadenza is, again, almost required to rotate effectively given Alto's large need of field time through the necessity of a basic attack string to activate his forte when his skill is down. If it takes you too long to build up this energy on Alto, you will waste a lot of the uptime on your support buffs. I unfortunately do not own a cadenza myself, so I chose not to slot either of these two onto my teams. Jiyan doesn't benefit a huge amount from basic attack and resonance liberation buffers, as well as other characters. But the raw strength of his grouping and his very high damage consolidates 2 roles into one and simply makes him the strongest for the left side of the zone. The zone's effects, like I mentioned before, heavily boost energy regeneration rate and is almost tailor-made for Jiyan, who relies on his ultimate to do a majority of his damage. For the right side, the recommended DPS in my eyes is Calcharo. Even though the floor has a widely applicable team buff, he has the best overall DPS out of the current cast aside from Jiyan. The only problem with this floor is his lack of personal grouping and limited AoE on many of his attacks. There are a lot of floors with multiple enemies, and each floor has multiple waves. However, Calcharo has several amazing teammates that streamline this weakness in his kit. My 2 recommendations for groupers include Yang, and Jianzin. Both of these characters have grouping inherently on their resonance liberation, as well as great outro skills that boost either energy regeneration for Yang or give resonance liberation damage for Jianzin. When these characters use their liberation at the start of the floor, they can set up a great combo for Calcharo and allow his small AoE attacks to hit multiple enemies. Unfortunately, camera can be an issue, especially on the 4th floor. Enemies like the Heron and the Spectroprism will literally perform evasive maneuvers and undo grouping in an instant. The Heron has a charge attack that can both ungroup and regroup the enemies, making any components of a fast for the 4th floor very RNG based. This movement RNG is especially important on the 2nd side because the 4th floor has a 2nd wave, which is the boss. You have a time limit of 2 minutes to clear both of these waves if you want to get all possible rewards. It can be a challenge. It is almost mandatory to clear the first wave between 30 to 45 seconds to have a good chance with the boss. This means that you might have a lot of resets in your future. One wrong move from any of these opponents in the first wave can easily have you losing over 10 seconds of time just running around the arena. This makes echoes that have a large amount of travel distance, like the Ape, Crane, and the Thunder Mephis, very effective in rounding up and potentially finishing off low health enemies. These birds, by the way, they can heal. all the way back up to full HP. The Ache spawns right after you finish off the first wave. Its moveset as it enters the arena isn't too annoying to deal with, but there are several near one-hit kill moves. This move is fortunately parryable, but missing the parry and getting instantly killed is doubly frustrating on this floor, as you'll have to deal with the grouping nightmare of the first wave all over again. About a minute into the fight, the Aches will become extremely hard to hit and perform a series of attacks where it repeatedly flies up into the air. Assuming you clear the first side in less than a minute, this move can spell the literal end of your run if you accidentally burn your Forte bar or your Resonance Liberation on it while it's in the air and pretty much unhittable for those 10 seconds of time. The number one thing to keep in mind as you clear all of these floors is to have patience. Here are some final tips, tricks, and reminders. First, your energy and cooldowns are fully reset when you restart a floor. Your Concerto energy goes back to 0. 2. Regular enemies have a much more unpredictable moveset, while bosses are a bit more scripted in what they're going to do. Third is that learning patterns on the bosses is key. On the other hand, for non-boss floors, effective grouping when there are multiple enemies is much higher of a priority. Third is that with that previous point in mind, build your Yang Yang or your Johnson ASAP, maximizing that energy regeneration. You will not regret it. Fifth is that the DPS characters provided on this list are some of the highest ranking in the game. They are recommended because of the buffs in the experimental zone, which heavily promotes the use of arrow and electro damage dealers. Some honorable mentions for other great DPS characters include Ling Yang and the Havoc Rover, along with Dan Jin. However, prioritizing the two featured characters like I mentioned before means that you're going to basically just streamline your leveling and gearing experience as you enter the hazard zone, saving you more resources in the long run by prioritizing these two. Hopefully, this guide was helpful for any player looking to clear the tower, unlock the hazard zone, and get the thousands of Astrites and hundreds of tuners waiting for them in the shop. The tower is not easy, but the rewards are substantial. Any player looking to progress their account quickly has an incredible option here, but a second built DPS is mandatory to get the job done. Good luck on your battles, may you be blessed by RNG, and avoid the Aches' one-shot move. Peace out, Rovers.